A gust of air, like the foul-smelling breath of some horrible monster, greets the adventurers as they climb the steps of a tower in Castle Ravenloft. Nearing the top, they begin to hear the beating of a heart in the darkness above. Not a human heart, but the heart of something monstrous and horrible. Such is the nature of Gothic horror. Fear, bred by anticipation, and the dark realization that all will be truly and horribly revealed in time. So begins the Curse of Strahd page titled simply, Marks of Horror. Unlike many modules, Curse of Strahd provides DMs with an explicit framework to modify its content, and this single, oft-forgotten page is key to making the campaign haunting, engaging, and above all else, fair. The book presents 7 Marks of Horror, 4 horrific, 1 neutral, and 2 positive. The darkest marks of horror heighten your player's dread and fear. The first mark, the unknown, uses your player's fear of the unknown to create terror of imminent attack and induce hopelessness in a once hopeful situation. The second mark, Foreshadowing, uses clues and prophetic dreams to warn your players of dangerous encounters and horrible secrets. The third mark, Age, reminds players of death, decay, and their own mortality. The fourth mark, Personification, turns mundane objects into malevolent entities, describing them with human-like emotions, actions, or appearances. The fifth mark, Detail, is more neutral, but describing scenery with increased details will surely make your players paranoid, perhaps while also drawing their gaze away from the true danger. The last 2 marks are far less morbid, but no less important. The sixth mark, Light, provides players with occasional moments of hope and joy, contrasting with the dark shadows elsewhere. Finally, the seventh mark, Humor, gives players a chance to break that tension, relaxing the mood and giving horror a chance to sneak up again on them later. You can find more information on these marks on page 7 of the Curse of Strahd module, but for now, let's examine how to wield them in actual play. These tools can do more than scaring your players. They're also vital for running a fair game. As written, Curse of Strahd is an infamously deadly adventure. From night hags to shambling mounds and even Strahd himself, death is cheap in Barovia. However, these elements of fear can give your players a fighting chance to stay alive. In the most basic sense, a frightened player is a careful player. If they know that something deadly is around the corner, they'll be less likely to rush blindly ahead. Instead, they'll be more likely to strategize, evade, or flee. You can also use fear to set expectations for your world. If dangerous areas or objects are horrific and safe ones more mellow, players will quickly pick this up. However, it's vital to recognize that this is a promise you make to your players. By making dangerous areas scarier, you're promising that players can avoid danger by intelligently watching their environment. If you break this promise, for example, by making a seemingly safe area deadly or vice versa, your players will abandon their efforts at prediction and resume bumbling through Barovia. This point is incredibly important, so let me repeat it. It might seem satisfying to give your players a jump scare or otherwise subvert their expectations, but these approaches work much better in passive media. D&D is a form of active media, and we want to make sure our players have a strong sense of agency. Accordingly, you need to give your players the tools they need to exercise that agency wisely, which means keeping your promises and setting expectations that they can rely on. Finally, you can use these marks of horror to present hints and clues to your players, pointing towards solutions or new sources of information. Foreshadowing is an especially powerful tool here, allowing you to push your players toward or away from certain areas or quests as you choose. So, how do we create new sources of fear? D&D offers several places to look. First, Statblocks. For each monster in a given area, look at its features, attacks, and, if it has any, spells. The shambling mound's vines might stretch through the room like long, jet-black roots, or a Strahd zombie might present as a bloated, fragile corpse. A druid's produced flame might leave scorch marks on nearby surfaces, or a werewolf might leave claw marks and matted patches of fur on nearby branches. Don't forget to check monster lore either. The monster manual can tell you that unnatural sounds, cold spots, and strange sensations arise in places haunted by ghosts, and that ghouls thrive in areas rank with decay and death. Next, look to the environment. Are there footprints in the mud? What kinds of footprints? Has the area been disturbed in some unwholesome way? Does the monster's lore suggest a preference for a certain kind of environment? Has it changed that environment to suit its needs? Make it clear that this area is no longer a place for mortals, but a haven for monsters. Finally, use movie tropes. Footsteps on an upstairs floor. Heavy breathing beside a player's ear. A strange reflection in a mirror. Clichés are clichés for a reason. They work. Don't be afraid to fall back on a familiar tool when you need to. They're reliable for a reason. Now that we know where marks of horror come from, how do we use them? An essay titled The Trajectory of Fear, written by Ash Law, provides an excellent breakdown of horror in both Hollywood films and role-playing games alike. The article breaks player fear down into 4 stages: unease, dread, terror, and horror. Unease is the start of fear. It is the knowledge that something is not right in the world. The players should know that something is wrong here, but it's not an immediate threat, and it's not clearly defined. This might be a village whose streets are empty during the day, or a strange mask lying in the woods. The next step is dread. It's the unconfirmed suspicion that something is not right in the world, and it is here. The players know that danger exists and that it is close, but cannot know just how close. Think of a strange sound echoing in the night, or a mutilated corpse with fresh wounds. Terror is the next step in the progression, and the most powerful type of fear. Here, the players know that something terrible is clearly imminent, and that the danger is here and now, but that it's still yet to be revealed. This is the highest point on the trajectory of fear, when the players hear a rasping breath on the other side of a door or inhuman footsteps rapidly approaching. Horror is the last stop on this roller coaster of fear, and, paradoxically, the weakest. This is the moment when the players meet the danger at last, screaming and jumping back in fear, thereby releasing the tension and placing us back at the bottom of the ride. This is the moment when the monster bursts into the room and a fight, or a flight, begins. Each step builds on the last, but a good horror story rarely reaches the top. You can build tension by pushing the fear into unease and then diffusing the scene back into dread. You can and should make this tension unbearable by building up to terror and then falling back to unease or dread. By doing so, you deny your players the release of horror, the moment when the danger is revealed, and in doing so, turn their own imaginations against them. You shouldn't overdo this. Avoid skipping to terror without building dread and unease first, and make sure not to overuse any part of this ride. Too much dread risks making your game feel camp and overdone. Too much terror risks burning your players out. Balance is key. So, how can we apply the marks of horror in this trajectory? Each mark is useful for a different stage. You can use age, personification, and details to create unease in a scene. Use foreshadowing to create mounting dread. Then, lean on the unknown to create terror in your players, and release that tension with a gruesomely detailed reveal. You can also use humor to diffuse tension or create moments of levity and light to give your players the hope and courage they need to soldier on. These can be friendly NPCs like Irina, Ismark, or the Mardikovs. These can also be moments of beauty or occasional moments of peace. Don't forget these. After all, it's the brightness of the light that makes the shadows seem so much darker. Marks of horror can be tricky to get right, but incredibly valuable if done well. It can be tough to come up with your own at first, which is why I've compiled a list of examples I created for Death House. You can find them, and a link to the full Trajectory of Fear article, at the links below. As you read, you'll find that many areas of Barovia, especially those with pre-made flavor text, come with their own pre-packaged marks of horror already. Even so, it's up to you to expand and accentuate those with your own. And so, as you run Curse of Strahd, do try to keep this at the forefront of your thoughts. In Barovia, fear isn't an emotion or a state of mind. It's a way of life, and you should do all you can to make sure your players know that.